January 31st, 1945. Clark Air Base, Luzon, Philippines. The air hangs heavy with the scent of crushed frangipani and cordite, a tropical rot laced with the metallic tang of spilled avgas. The monsoon season has broken, but the ground remains a churned slurry of red mud and shattered palm fronds, pockmarked by craters that still steam faintly in the dawn light. American GIs, their fatigues stiff with dried sweat and island grime, pick through the wreckage of what was once the Imperial Japanese Navy's forward bastion. Crumpled Zeros lie like discarded toys, their fuselages split open by 50 caliber spite. A few Me-262s, German gifts to a sinking empire, smolder in the distance, their jet intakes choked with volcanic ash from distant Pinatubo. But amid the detritus, one prize stands untouched, almost reverent in its isolation. A Mitsubishi G4M2 Betty bomber, tail number 76312, captured intact by the 5th Air Force's rapid advance. No scorched wings, no riddled cockpit glass. It squats on the tarmac like a great silver moth, its twin Mitsubishi Kase engines hooded in canvas tarps, props folded back like the arms of a supplicant. The morning sun glances off its aluminum skin, turning the rivet lines into threads of liquid gold. To the untrained eye, it's a relic of elegance. A streamlined predator that once slipped through Pacific skies like a whisper. Major Frank T. McCoy steps from an olive-drab Willys Jeep, his boots sinking into the muck with a wet schlop. At 42, McCoy is a wiry man, built for the precision of drafting tables rather than the chaos of forward bases. His face, framed by wire-rimmed spectacles perpetually fogged by humidity, bears the map of 1,000 blueprints. Fine lines etched from late nights poring over captured schematics in the dim glow of a B-17's navigator lamp. As chief of the U.S. Technical Air Intelligence Unit, TAUSWPA, the Southwest Pacific's scalpel for dissecting enemy ingenuity, he has seen the innards of FU-190s gutted on New Guinea airstrips and A6M0s flayed open on Henderson Field. But this is different. "Secure the perimeter, gentlemen," McCoy calls, his voice steady but edged with the clipped authority of a man who knows the value of uncontaminated evidence. His team fans out. Lieutenant Elias Grant, a bespectacled MIT boy with ink-stained fingers and a perpetual squint. Sergeant Roy Harlan, the grease monkey veteran whose calloused hands have rebuilt more engines than most men have hot meals. And a half-dozen enlisted techs, lugging tool crates that clank like medieval armor. They move with the deliberate hush of archaeologists unearthing a pharaoh's barge. Boots echoing softly on the hangar apron, the only sound save for the distant thump-thump of a deuce-and-a-half hauling ammo crates. McCoy circles the Betty slowly, his clipboard tucked under one arm like a shield. At first glance, it's a marvel. 68 feet from nose to tail, wingspan stretching 37 yards of taut, fabric-sheathed elegance. The fuselage tapers like a stiletto, unburdened by the bulbous bomb bays or armored bellies of American B-25s. No heavy radial engines here. The Castle's air-cooled 14-cylinder beasts are slimmer, hungrier for speed. Reports from the front whisper of its velocity. 265 miles per hour in level flight, faster than the lumbering B-17s it once shadowed. And the range? God, the range. Over 3,000 miles on internal tanks alone, enough to arc from Tokyo to Darwin and back without a refuel. A ghost in the machine of war, McCoy thinks, tracing a gloved finger along the leading edge of the starboard wing. Built to strike and vanish before the echo fades. "Major," Grant says, peering up at the cockpit canopy, his breath fogging the Lexan. "She's a beauty. Look at that laminar flow, prefigures our own P-80 jets. And the weight, under 20,000 pounds loaded, lighter than a Dauntless dive bomber, yet twice the payload." McCoy nods, jotting notes. Fascination stirs in him, like the first pull of a starter crank. This isn't some jury-rigged kamikaze jalopy, it's engineering distilled to essence. The Japanese had cracked the code of the long haul, trading bulk for ballistic grace. He imagines it aloft, the low whump of props biting humid air, the horizon unspooling like a scroll of rice paper. No wonder it terrorized the Solomons, slipping in low over the waves, torpedoes rippling from its belly to gut carriers like Yorktown or Hornet. Allied pilots called it the Flying Lighter, a nod to its rumored fragility, but McCoy dismisses the slang as foxhole superstition. Superstition dies under the knife of inspection. "Let's crack her open," McCoy orders. "Start with the cockpit. Harlan, get me the panel tools. Grant, inventory the ordnance bays. The team sets to work with the quiet efficiency of a surgical theater. Harlan's crowbar slips under the access hatch with a metallic snick, and the cockpit yawns wide. McCoy climbs the folding ladder, his knees protesting the angle, and eases into the pilot's seat. The controls greet him like an old rival. Stick and rudder pedals worn smooth by gloved hands, a bakelite yoke etched with kanji warnings. The instrument panel gleams, altimeter, airspeed, tachometers clustered like the dials of a forbidden clockwork. No frills, no excess, just the bare poetry of flight. A magnetic compass swinging lazily in its gimbal, a fuel gauge needle hovering at half mark. He leans forward, sniffing the stale incense of oiled leather and lingering sock, perhaps a crewman's last flask, abandoned in haste. The bombardier station below is a nest of triggers and sights, the Norden bomb site's American cousin, rendered in minimalist fury. Efficient, McCoy muses, ruthless in its simplicity. But as Grant calls up from the ventral hatch, no defensive guns in the tail, sir, just a single 20mm Oerlikon, a faint unease prickles. The Betty's silhouette promised offense without apology, but where's the ballast of survival? No powered turrets, no 50 cal emplacements fore and aft. Just observation blisters, glass-eyed and vulnerable. Fuel system next, McCoy says, descending. Wings first. I want every manifold mapped. Harlan and the tech swarm the port wing, unbolting inspection panels with ratchets that whine like impatient specters. Sunlight floods the cavities, illuminating a lattice of struts and wiring bundles, neat as a spider's web, sheathed in translucent dope that smells faintly of banana oil. McCoy kneels beside them, his flashlight beam dancing across the main spar. The tanks come into view. Elongated bladders, slung low in the wing roots, their aluminum skins no thicker than a dime. 700 gallons per side, sloshing with the dregs of 100 octane, enough promethium to light half of Manila. But it's the absence that hits first. No liners, no neoprene coatings. The fuel bathes the structure directly, seeping into every seam and rivet hole, like a biblical flood waiting for a spark. McCoy's beam lingers on a naked weld, tracing the raw edge where tank meets spar. No baffles, no foam suppressants, just metal kissing volatile ether. Jesus, Major, Harlan mutters, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag black as sump oil. This ain't right. Our B-24's got self-sealing rubber from here to Sunday, patch a 30 cal hit like a Band-Aid. But this, one burst from a P-38, and it's a Roman candle. Grant joins them, his face paling beneath the stubble. He probes a seam with a probe gauge, the needle quivering. 0.04 inches, sir. That's cocktail napkin thickness. And look, no armor plating around the crew stations. The pilot's back, exposed like a screen door. A single incendiary. McCoy straightens, his clipboard forgotten in his grip. The hangar falls into that profound silence that follows a thunderclap, the drip of condensation from the eaves, the distant caw of a jungle myna. He steps back, viewing the wing as a whole. A silver vein pulsing with peril, beautiful in its peril. They knew, he thinks, the realization coiling like smoke. This wasn't oversight. This was calculus. To shave pounds for range, they'd gambled lives on the altar of velocity. Every gallon saved was a mile gained, every ounce of steel omitted, a prayer against interception. He moves to the fuselage now, the team trailing like acolytes. The bomb bay doors swing open on oiled hinges, revealing a womb of racks and shackles. Torpedoes or 800-pounders could nestle here, dropped with surgical spite. But again, the voids scream louder. No fire bottles dangling from struts, no CO2 extinguishers bolted to bulkheads. The crew compartment beyond is a sardine can for 7 souls, pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, gunners, crammed with jump seats and ammo cans, but no flak jackets slung on hooks, no armored glass in the blisters, just canvas partitions and a single escape hatch, rusted from disuse. It's hollow, Grant whispers, echoing McCoy's thoughts, like they built a cathedral to speed and forgot the congregation. McCoy climbs into the radio operator's nook, the space so tight his shoulders brush the sides. The Morse key sits cold, beside a logbook half filled with faded ink, coordinates scrawled in haste, perhaps en route to some dawn raid on Lady. He flips it open, the page is crackling like dry leaves. Entries in katakana untranslated, but the urgency bleeds through, tight loops, ink smears from trembling hands. Did they know? The question burrows. Did the crew strap in each dawn, aware their chariot carried death in its veins? Outside, Harlan lights a Chesterfield, the match flare casting shadows that dance like imps across the Betty's flanks. Heard stories from the grunts, Major. Call her the flying Zippo. One hit, and poof, gone in a fireball. Lost a whole squadron off her ball that way, they say. McCoy emerges, blinking into the glare. The sun has climbed, baking the aluminum until it shimmers like a mirage. He circles once more, the plane's silhouette now accusatory, sleek lines masking skeletal frailty. The fuel cap on the wing, a simple screw top, gleams mockingly. He unscrews it, peers in. The residue laps at the rim, sweet and cloying, a siren's perfume. One tracer round, and this bird becomes Icarus Redux. The team gathers, tools stilled, awaiting orders. McCoy's mind races through the specs. 1,830 horsepower per engine, climb rate of 1,800 feet per minute, service ceiling 30,000 feet. Numbers that dazzle on paper, but in the flesh, in this gutted hangar, they curdle. Brilliance, unarmored. The ideology peeks through the welds, a faith in precision over fortitude, in the perfect strike over the probable return. He closes the panel with a soft thunk, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the base. No fanfare, no epiphany's thunder. Just the weight of comprehension settling like monsoon silt. No armor, no seals, no chance. What were they thinking? Nagoya, Japan, September 1937. The air in Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Design Bureau carries the faint, acrid bite of solder flux and drafting ink, mingled with the ever-present humidity that seeps through the shoji screens like an uninvited guest. Outside, the autumn rice harvest bends under a sky bruised with typhoon clouds, but inside the low-slung concrete bunker that passes for an engineering hall, time bends to the will of slide rules and blueprints. Fluorescent lamps buzz overhead, casting a sterile pallor on workbenches cluttered with balsa mock-ups, stress test girders, and half-assembled wind tunnel models that rattle faintly in the draft from open vents. The room hums with the subdued murmur of conversation. Engineers in starched white shirts, sleeves rolled to elbows, murmuring calculations in clipped syllables, their abacuses clicking like impatient rosaries. Kiro Honjo, chief designer of Mitsubishi's Naval Aircraft Division, stands at the head of a long oak table scarred from years of knife-point revisions. At 38, Honjo is a figure of quiet intensity, slight frame swallowed by a woolen vest, his black hair slicked back with pomade that fails to tame the cowlick at his temple. His eyes, sharp as drafting points, scan the assembled team, 20 men, the elite of Japan's aeronautical vanguard, summoned from across the empire. A graduate of Tokyo Imperial University, Honjo has already etched his name into the annals with the A5M fighter, a bird of prey that danced circles around biplanes in mock combats over the inland sea. But this summons is no accolade, it's a gauntlet. The door slides open with a whisper of rice paper, admitting Rear Admiral Takeo Takagi, his uniform crisp as a fresh blueprint, gold braid glinting under the lamps. Takagi is a bridge between worlds. A surface warfare man with salt in his veins from Tsingtao patrols, now thrust into the aerial arm's escalating demands. He carries a leather folio under one arm, stamped with the chrysanthemum seal of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The room falls silent, the only sound, the tick-tock of a wall clock marking seconds, like rivets in a spar. "Gentlemen," Takagi begins, his voice resonant, laced with the gravel of command decks. "The Navy has a vision. The Emperor's vision. War clouds gather over China and beyond, resources in the Dutch East Indies, mandates in the Pacific. Our carriers cannot reach them without eyes in the sky that see farther than any Yankee tub or limey cruiser." He unfurls the folio, pinning a map to the table with brass weights. Red arrows snake from Formosa to Manila, Tokyo to Singapore. Arcs of ambition spanning 3,000 kilometers, then 3,700, a distance that mocks the 2,000-mile leash of the American B-17. Honjo leans in, his fingers tracing the ink lines, feeling the weight of geography as acutely as if it were lead ballast. The Navy's directive is etched in the margins. Type 13 land-based attack bomber. Range 3,700 kilometers unrefueled. Speed 230 knots cruise. Payload 1,000 kilograms bombs or 1 aerial torpedo. Crew 7. Ceiling 10,000 meters. Honjo's mind whirs like a geared altimeter. The numbers clash like cymbals. Current bombers, the G4M Nell, his own earlier triumph, stretched to 2,400 miles, but at a cost: sluggish climb, vulnerable flanks. To eclipse that, to outrange the horizon itself, demands heresy. Lighter alloys, streamlined forms, but steel is steel, gravity, unforgiving. Admiral, Honjo ventures, his tone measured, a probe into the void. 3,700 kilometers, that's midway and back from Saipan with reserves. Our prototypes strain at 2,500 with armor and seals. To achieve this, we must. He pauses, selecting words like rivets, precise, unyielding. We must reconsider protections. Takagi's gaze hardens, a squall line on the map. Reconsider? Commander Honjo, the fleet requires dominance, not convalescence. Your A5M strikes without mercy. This bird must do the same from afar. China burns. Nanking falls next month. We strike deep, or we bleed shallow. The room shifts uneasily, pencils scratching notes, eyes darting to Honjo. He nods, swallowing the calculus. Back at his drafting table that night, under a gooseneck lamp that paints his face in amber hollows, Honjo unrolls vellum sheets, the paper whispering like wind over wings. He sketches the outline: a monoplane, low wing, twin engine, fuselage tapered to a needlepoint. The engines, Mitsubishi Kase radials, 14 cylinders apiece, supercharged for thin air, mount nacelles flush against the wings, minimizing drag like a kimono's fold. Wings sweep back slightly, fabric skinned over aluminum spars, designed to slice atmosphere like a katana. But range is the tyrant. Fuel, 1,400 gallons minimum, distributed in wing tanks and a ventral bladder. At 0.45 specific fuel consumption, that's the margin. Weight creeps up, empty at 13,000 pounds, loaded to 20,000. Every addition is an anchor. The self-sealing tanks from the G4M, rubber-lined bladders that swell against punctures, add 800 pounds. Armor plate for the cockpit, another 400. Black curtains, fire extinguishers, reinforced glass, 600 more. Honjo's pencil hovers, eraser chewing at the edges. Sacrifice, he thinks, the word coiling like incense smoke. Not lives yet, but the illusion of them. The Navy's philosophy, distilled in war games at Etajima: offense is the soul of defense. Strike first, strike far, survival is secondary to the blow landed. Honjo recalls the briefings, admirals invoking Bushido, the way of the warrior, where the plane is an extension of the pilot's spirit, not a cage of iron. Light as a haiku, deadly as a haiku. By dawn, the first cuts, tanks stripped to bare aluminum, 0.04-inch skins that gleam like rice paper under varnish. No liners, no neoprene to staunch leaks, no baffles to starve flames. Fuel bathes the structure, seeping into longerons, a volatile sacrament. Armor? Excised like a vestigial fin, crew seats of wicker and canvas, pilot's bulkhead a half-inch plate, laughable against 20mm shells. Defensive armament slims to essentials, one 7.7mm in the nose, twins in blisters, a 20mm dorsal mount, positions exposed, gunners perched in glass bubbles like goldfish in a storm. Honjo tests the mock-up in the wind tunnel 2 weeks later, a cavernous shed on the Nagoya outskirts where propellers whine like banshees, spinning at 2,000 RPM to simulate 200-knot gales. The balsa model, scaled 1 to 12, trundles in on rails, its struts quivering. Gauges flicker, smoke trails from wingtips curling in laminar flow. The numbers sing: drag coefficient 0.024, lift-to-drag ratio 18:1. Range projections unspool, 3,800 kilometers on paper, with a 10% margin. Magnificent, murmurs Dr. Kenji Tanaka, Honjo's deputy, a bespectacled mathematician with ink-flecked cuffs. She'll outfly the Devastator by half again. The Americans won't see her coming. Honjo watches the model, its wings flexing like bamboo in the gale. Beauty emerges, the silhouette elegant as a heron's neck, promising speed that blurs the line between bomber and interceptor. But as the test ends, a seam splits. A microfracture in the wing root, fuel simulant, kerosene-dyed blue, weeping from the gash. It pools on the tunnel floor, a sapphire stain, and Honjo's stomach knots. 150 cal, and that's not simulant. That's hellfire. He voices it in the debrief, voice low amid the cooling fan's whir. Admiral Takagi, the trade-offs, the tanks, a hit here. He taps the blueprint, finger on the port nacelle, and she ignites from wingtip to tail. Crew evaporation in seconds. Takagi, arrived for the review, sips tea from a lacquered cup, steam curling like dragon's breath. Commander, war is ignition. The spirit that flies her must burn bright, not cower in steel. Your G4M faltered at Shanghai, too heavy, too slow. This reaches the enemy's heart before he draws breath. The crews understand, they volunteer knowing. Honjo bows, the motion automatic, but his mind rebels. He thinks of the pilots. Boys from the naval academies, faces fresh as polished propellers, strapping into mock-ups for zero-G tosses in converted biplanes. Do they grasp the arithmetic? The fuel, 5,000 liters of high-octane peril, slung unprotected like sake in a paper lantern? Later, alone in his quarters, a tatami room overlooking the factory smokestacks belching night shift fury, Honjo pores over stress reports. The math is merciless. 1,200 pounds saved on protections translate to 400 nautical miles, enough to bomb Darwin from Timor or raid Pearl from the Marshalls. Flash to the prototype's first flight, March 1939. Kasumigara Naval Air Base, Lake Kasumigara's waters silver under spring sun. The G4M designation Betty to the enemy, but here simply Rico, the land attack beast, taxis on the grass strip, its tail dragging furrows, props chewing dew-wet turf. Lieutenant Commander Katsuji Kawada at the controls, a veteran of the China incident, his flight suit patched from a wheels-up landing off Henko. The engines cough to life, blue flames licking exhaust stacks, then settle into a throaty rumble that vibrates the earth. Honjo watches from the tower, binoculars pressed to eyes, heart sinking with the thrust. The Betty lurches forward, tail rising, then lifts, graceful, almost avian, climbing at 1,200 feet per minute into the hazy vault. 4 hours later, it circles back, fuel gauges dipping to 15%, airframe cool to the touch. Kawada lands with a skip, grinning through the canopy. She flies like a dream, Honjo-san, light as thought, swift as regret. The team erupts in subdued cheers, saw cups clink, blueprints waved like flags. But Honjo lingers by the wing, hand on the warm aluminum, feeling the pulse of unspent fuel beneath. A ground crewman, wiping down the nacelle, pauses. Beautiful, isn't she? Like poetry in metal. Poetry, Honjo echoes inwardly, the word bitter as bile. That night, in his journal, bound in black silk, entries in brushstroke precision, he writes, "We have birthed a specter. It will cross seas no other can, but at what toll? The Navy demands the unreachable. We deliver the unforgivable." Production ramps, 50 airframes by Pearl Harbor, factories in Nagoya and Okayama churning like forges in a fever dream. Honjo oversees the line, women in Monpei trousers riveting skins, men welding spars amid the clang of pneumatic hammers. Each Betty emerges silver bright, a squadron of phantoms destined for Rabal's coral runways or Formosa's thunderheads. But in quiet moments, Honjo traces the fuel lines on inspection prints, the paths of peril branching like veins in a leaf. They'll burn, he knows, the certainty settling like ash. Not all, but enough. For range, for reach. The first combat reports trickle in, summer 1940. Raids on Chungking, Betty's ghosting over the Yangtze at 20,000 feet, bombs tumbling like black pearls. Success. Factories razed, rivers choked with debris. But whispers follow. A flak burst shreds a wing, the plane cartwheels into the gorge, a comet's tail of fire. No survivors. Isolated incident, the Navy cables. Pushed too low. Honjo folds the dispatch, tucking it away. The design evolves. G4M1 to G4M2, engines boosted to 1,850 horses, range nudged to 2,900 miles, but the bones remain. Hollow, hungry, alight with latent doom. He meets Kawada at a sake house in Tokyo, the lanterns swaying in a post-quake breeze, cherry blossoms shedding petals like spent casings. She handles like a geisha's fan, Kawada toasts, cup raised. But the fuel, it sloshes like a drunkard's gut. One spark. Honjo meets his eyes over the rim. "We built her to fly far, old friend. Not to linger." Kawada laughs, but it rings hollow, echoing the empty bays of the Betty's soul. Outside, the city sleeps under blackout curtains, unaware that across the sea a machine is rising, one that will redefine the Pacific, not with thunder, but with the soft whoosh of wings trading tomorrow for today. To fly farther than anyone alive. They had to build something that couldn't come back. Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, 3 hours after the first wave. The sky over Oahu is a cauldron of black smoke and climbing tracers. The harbor a charnel house of twisted masts and oil-slicked piers. Arizona lists to starboard. Her forward magazine a blooming inferno that paints the palms in hellish orange. But the raid's architect, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, has already turned east, his carriers steaming into the trade winds, their decks alive with the clack-clack of arresting wires snaring returning Zeros. Among the stragglers, a formation of G3M Nels limps home, their fuselages pocked by AA fire. But the true vanguard, the G4M Bettys of the 22nd Air Flotilla, circle unseen, ghosts in the periphery, their torpedoes expended in the chaos. Cut to January 1942. Clark Field, Luzon, Philippines. The American Far East Air Force lies gutted, P-40s smoldering on revetments like sacrificial offerings, their pilots' boots still warm in the cockpits. Dawn breaks humid and merciless, the Sierra Madre's silhouette etched against a blood-red horizon. From Formosa, 600 miles north, 27 Bettys detach from their mother base at Takao, engines throttling to cruise at 180 knots, wings slicing the dawn like scimitars. Led by Commander Shoji Nishio, a stoic alumnus of the Yokosuka Naval Air Corps, they arc south over the Lingayen Gulf, fuel tanks sloshing with the rhythm of the swells below. No armor weighs their shoulders, no seals buffer the ether's bite, just 7 souls per bird, pilot, observer, bombardier, radio man, gunners, huddled in canvas nests, breath fogging the canopy as they cross the dateline of doom. On the ground, Lieutenant James Harrington, a 24-year-old from Spokane, Washington, wipes grease from his hands on a rag that smells of cordite and fear. Fresh from the 17th Pursuit Squadron, Harrington's P-40E Warhawk squats fueled and armed, its shark-mouthed nose painted in hasty olive drab. The base buzzes with frantic energy, mechanics heaving 500-pounders onto B-17 racks, radio men crackling with intercepts. Bandits inbound, bearing 350. Harrington straps in, the cockpit a cocoon of leather and levers, his 50 cals racked with 281 rounds per gun. This is it, he thinks, throttle cracking open, the Allison V-1710 snarling to life. Payback for Pearl. The Bettys arrive at 10:15 a.m., a silver V formation materializing from the haze like avenging Kami, 20,000 feet above the valley. Nishio's lead ship, G4M 316, banks slightly, sun glinting off its tapered nose as the bombardier peers through the drift sight, adjusting for a 10-knot crosswind. Below, Clark's runways swarm, 35 B-17s, 25 P-40s, a dozen A-20s lined wingtip to wingtip, bombs half-loaded, crews exposed like ants on a griddle. No radar warning, no interceptors aloft. The first stick falls at 10:18, 18 60-kilogram bombs from the formation's veins, tumbling in a staggered cascade, fuses ticking like New Year's fireworks. Harrington's Warhawk claws skyward just as the earth erupts, craters blooming in chain lightning fury, revetments shearing like rice paper. A B-17 at field's edge lifts off in panic, only to catch a 250-pounder amidships. It cartwheels, shedding wings in a debris rainbow, slamming into a hangar in a thunderclap of aluminum and screams, "Brake left! Incoming!" Harrington's wingman crackles, but the sky fills with silk. Parachutes from a gutted A-20, men dangling like broken puppets. The Bettys press on, unmolested, their 20mm gunners traversing empty air, barrels cold. Second pass, torpedoes ripple from the ventral bays, not needed here, but the bombs rain again, 550-pounders cratering the flight line, fuel dumps igniting in geysers of flame that climb 500 feet, blackening the morning. Nishio's voice over the intercom, calm as a tea ceremony, targets acquired, release on my mark. The formation ghosts through the smoke, engines a distant drone like summer cicadas, vanishing east before the P-40s gain altitude. Harrington levels off at 8,000 feet, heart pounding against his May West, scanning the pall. 16 bombers destroyed on the ground, 9 fighters, hangars reduced to skeletal fingers clawing the sky. Casualties, 53 dead, 80 wounded. The Bettys, 0 losses. Fuel burn, 40%. Return to Takao assured. Word spreads like monsoon fire. In MacArthur's Corregidor bunker, aides pore over reconnaissance photos, grainy Raptor shots showing the Betty's silhouette, annotated with red pencils. Range, est 3,000 miles. Speed, 250+ miles per hour. Armament, minimal. One-way tickets, a colonel mutters, but the fear is palpable. These aren't the lumbering Vals or lumberjack Kates of Pearl. They're specters, striking from beyond the horizon, gone before the echo. February 10th, 1942, South China Sea, 200 miles east of Singapore. Force Z, Britain's last hope in the east, steams south at 18 knots, Prince of Wales and Repulse cutting white wakes under a moonless sky. Admiral Sir Tom Phillips commands from the battlecruiser's bridge, binoculars sweeping the velvet dark, unaware that from Cam Ranh Bay, Indochina, 9 Bettys of the Kanoya Air Group lift off at 20:45 hours, bound 550 miles east. Commander Ito Masanobu at the helm of the lead G4M2, his crew bundled against the slipstream's chill, silk scarves over flight jackets, oxygen masks dangling like nooses. The attack unfolds at 0:50 hours, the Bettys diving from 12,000 feet in echelons of 3, star shells from repulse popping like futile fireflies. Ito's bombardier aligns the crosshairs on Prince of Wales's amidships turret, the ship's silhouette a gray leviathan against phosphorescent foam. Bombs away, the intercom crackles, 4 550-pounders plunging in a stick that brackets the bow. 2 misses astern, 1 amidships that buckles the flight deck, the 4th shearing the catapult, hurling a swordfish biplane into the drink. Shrapnel peppers the Betty's belly, a 40mm pom-pom round grazing the starboard nacelle, but the thin skin holds, no spark, no bloom. Ito climbs away, the formation wheeling for torpedoes on the second wave. Aboard repulse? Harrington? No wait, Harrington is half a world away, but his echo lingers in the terror. A British rating, able seaman Tom Wilkins, grips a Lewis gun, tracers arcing futile into the night. The Bettys return at 01:30, 5 ships dropping long-lance torpedoes. Japan's 18-inch eels, 2,000 pounds of magnetic fury, released at 300 yards. One strikes Prince of Wales portside, flooding the engine rooms, another amidships, crumpling bulkheads. Repulse takes 3 in sequence, bow, beam, stern. Her hull opening like a zipper, bulkheads groaning as water surges in at 20 tons per second. Alarms wail, the cruiser lists 30 degrees, men sliding across oil-slick decks, abandoned ship claxons drowning in the roar of escaping steam. Phillips goes down with his flagship, the sea claiming him in a boil of debris. By 2:50, both ships settle, teals kissing coral 70 fathoms down. The Bettys form up at 5,000 feet, fuel gauges reading 55 cent, enough for the haul back to Indochina, with margin for a beer in Saigon. Losses: 1 Betty to flake, limping home with a holed wing, crew nursing the leak with rags and prayers. The world awakens to headlines. Singapore's shield sunk. Japanese superbombers strike from nowhere. Churchill cables Roosevelt. In all my years, nothing so dismaying. The Betty's legend ignites. Range as a weapon, speed as sorcery. Allied planners redraw maps, plotting picket lines from Darwin to Diego Garcia, every dot a potential grave. But cracks spider in the glamour. March 1942, Java Sea. As the ABA fleet fractures, Bettys from Sorabaja hammer the cruiser Exeter, bombs straddling her stacks, but a PBY spotter relays chords, and 4 Wildcats pounce from 10,000 feet. The lead Betty, caught low over the waves, takes a deflection burst from Lieutenant Bill Lambert's 50 cals, 6 rounds stitching the port wing. Fuel erupts in an azure flash, the wing folding like origami in flame. The bomber yaws right, trailing a comet's tail of ignited avgas, crew bailing in 2s and 3s, silk canopies blooming against the pyre. It cartwheels into the sea 40 miles off Bowen, a brief supernova swallowed by surf. Lambert circles the debris, radio crackling, splash 1 Rico, burned like the 4th of July. Ground crews recover the pilot later. Flight Petty Officer Masauato, adrift on a wing panel, salt-crusted and silent. Interrogated in a Darwin stockade, his English fractured but eyes unyielding. We flew the finest aircraft ever built, but it was designed to kill us. Back at Clark Field, Harrington's field, now a charnel under Japanese occupation. McCoy, in 1945, pores over captured logs from that January raid. The pages yellowed, ink faded to ghosts. The entries tally ordnance, 486 bombs dropped, 80% hits. But footnotes whisper, fuel leak en route, starboard tank. Emergency patch applied. No mention of fear, only duty. McCoy traces the flight path, pencil shadowing the arc, Formosa to Luzon, 650 miles out, 650 back, on fumes. They danced on the edge, he reflects, the hangar light casting long shadows across the Betty's captive form. And the edge bit back. The terror peaks in April, Doolittle's raid on Tokyo, a pinprick revenge, B-25s flung from Hornet's deck, bombs shattering sakura groves. Japan reels, but the Bettys strike back. From Rabaul, 108 aircraft, 74 Bettys, launch against the Yorktown Task Force off New Guinea. They find only empty sea, but en route, 8 P-40s from Port Moresby intercept at 15,000 feet. The dogfight is biblical, tracers lacing the cumulus, a Betty's dorsal gunner hosing a Warhawk's canopy, glass shattering in a pink mist. But a P-40's burst rakes a G4M's fuselage, tracers piercing the unarmored flank, igniting the ventral tank. The bomber erupts mid-banks, a fireball unspooling 2,000 feet, fragments raining like cherry pits. 5 chutes open, 4 foul in the updraft, tangling in flame. Harrington, rotated to Port Moresby, witnesses from his cockpit the acrid reek of burning dope wafting on thermals. "Got one," he teases, voice steady, but his hands tremble on the stick. That night, in a Quonset hut lit by Coleman lanterns, he scrawls a letter home. "These Japs have a bomber like nothing, fast as our fighters, hits from nowhere. But up close? Fragile. One burst, and they're candles." The reports flood MacArthur's HQ. Coral Sea brewing, Betty's probing the Louisi odds. Allied fear crests, their range a noose around supply lines from Hawaii to Australia. But whispers circulate. Flying lighters. One spark, and poof. Engineers in Brisbane dissect a crash-landed wreck, finding the tanks, bare metal, fuel residue caked like varnish, suicide specs, attack notes. McCoy, in his 1945 reverie, stacks the dispatches. Clark, Force Z'd, Java, triumphs etched in blood and billows. The Betty had clawed the Pacific Open, its speed a scalpel to Allied throats. But the first burns flicker like warnings on the wind. Isolated, yes, but harbingers. The machine that outran the dawn would soon outrun its own shadow. Speed had made it famous. Fire would make it legendary. Guadalcanal, August 1942. The slot, the narrow gut of water between Savo Island and the Florida Group, lies like a silver vein under the moon, its surface dappled with phosphorescence from the churn of destroyer wakes. Iron Bottom Sound, they call it now, a graveyard of hulls from the night battles. Quincy and Vincennes rusting in 300 fathoms, their screws still tangled in Japanese nets. But tonight, the sky claims the toll. From Rabaul, 600 miles northwest, 18 Bettys of the 751st Kokutai lift off into the pre-dawn murk, their Kasei engines muttering a low requiem as they form up over Simpson Harbor. Commander Yasuo Nakajima leads the van, his G4M2's cockpit a dim glow of red-filtered lamps, the fuel gauges already dipping from the long haul. 1,200 gallons burning at 150 gallons per hour, the tank's unlined aluminum warming like a fevered brow. Below, on Henderson Field's coral strip, now dubbed Cactus by the Cactus Air Force, the Marine Wildcats and Navy Dauntlesses huddle under palm frond camouflage. Their pilots snatching fitful sleep in foxholes lined with sacking. The Japanese know the drill. Dawn, milk runs, Betty's inbound to strafe the strip, bomb the fuel dumps, keep the flyboys pinned while the Tokyo Express unloads troops on the beaches. Nakajima's formation threads the clouds at 12,000 feet, the air thin and biting, oxygen masks fogging with each exhalation. In the radio shack, a Morse key taps coordinates. Target, Henderson. Ordnance, 250 kilograms 12. No banter. No jests. Just the hum of generators and the slap of signal flags in the slipstream. Lieutenant James Harrington, back from Port Moresby rotation, rolls out of his tent at 4:30. The jungle chorus. Cicadas and tree frogs. A deafening prelude. His F4F Wildcat, Buno 8710, squats fueled on the dispersals. 50 cals racked with 400 rounds, the cowling still warm from yesterday's cap. He straps in, the harness biting shoulders raw from weeks of harness rash, and keys the starter. The Pratt & Whitney coughs blue smoke, then bites air with a snarl. Scramble, scramble, Bandits Angels 12, bearing 310. The tower crackles, and Harrington's Grumman lifts into the velvet, joining a dozen fighters clawing for altitude on the ragged edge of dawn. The intercept blooms at 5:20, the Bettys materializing from the east like silver arrows, their silhouettes etched against the first peach smear on the horizon. Nakajima's lead ship dives shallow, bombs rippling from the bays in a staggered stick, craters pocking the strip, a Wildcat hangar erupting in a whoop of avgas that climbs 200 feet, painting the palms in sooty filigree. Harrington's flight, 4 F4Fs, pounces from the flanks, engines winding to 2,700 RPM, the world narrowing to gunsight rings and tracer streams. He closes on a trailing Betty, 400 yards, lead angle 20 degrees right, tally-ho, braking left, and squeezes the trigger. 650 cals hammer, muzzle flash strobing the canopy, rounds chewing the port nacelle at 800 yards per second. The impact is surgical. 3 tracers pierce the wing root, the unarmored skin parting like silk under a tanto. Fuel, 5,000 liters of 87-octane peril, ignites in a chain reaction, the vapor trail blooming azure, then crimson as the main tanks feed the pyre. Nakajima's wingman, Lieutenant Junior Grade Hiroshi Tanaka, feels the shudder first, a thump like a dropped drum, then the acrid reek of burning dope flooding the cockpit. Fire! Port wing ablaze, evacuate! The radio man yelps, but the intercom dissolves in static as flames lick the spars, aluminum melting at 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit, the structure buckling like wet cardboard. Tanaka yanks the stick, banking desperate for the slot, but the fire spreads voracious, consuming wiring bundles, igniting ammo cans in the ventral blister, the 20mm shells cooking off in erratic pops that shred the tail like confetti. The crew bails in panic. Bombardier first, his chute fouling on the horizontal stabilizer, a brief silhouette against the inferno before he plummets, a falling star trailing silk. The pilot hauls on the ripcord last, the harness snagging on the coaming, gone in the updraft, goggles reflecting the blaze like twin suns. The Betty dives inverted, a corkscrew of flame unspooling 8,000 feet, slamming into the sound in a geyser of steam and debris, the explosions crump rolling across the island like distant thunder. Harrington breaks away, the heat shimmer miraging his windscreen, the stench of scorched aluminum clinging to his flight suit. Confirmed kill, Rico down hard, he reports, voice leaden. Below, Henderson smolders. 2 fighters lost on the ground, a dozen craters, but the field lives, barely. The surviving Bettys, 12 now, ghost south, fuel trails feathering in their wakes, vanishing into the dawn like smoke from a peace pipe. Word filters back to Rabaul by noon, via skip-bomb radio relays. 6 Bettys lost, 4 to fighters, 2 to fire on return legs. Nakajima lands his scorched bird, the port wing pocked and blistered, ground crews swarming with foam and prayers. In the debrief tent, canvas walls slapping in the harbor breeze, he pens a dispatch to Yokosuka. Interception severe. Fuel system vulnerability noted. Recommend sealant retrofit. But the cable ends there, truncated by brass. Prioritize production. Range paramount. Back in the States months later, McCoy sifts these reports in a Quonset hut on Tinian, the air thick with mimeograph ink and the drip of condensation from tin roofs. The Guadalcanal campaign stretches into 43, a meat grinder of slot runs where Bettys become the Cactus Air Force's white whale. He stacks the folders. August 8th, the Battle of Savo's aerial aftermath. 5 Bettys torched by SBDs, their crews fished from the drink, lips blistered from fuel vapors. September 12th, a night raid intercepted by P-38s from Espiritu Santo, tracers igniting 3 G4Ms in sequence, the sky a lattice of fireballs that lit the searchlights for miles. Each account a litany. Hit starboard tank, immediate conflagration, no chutes observed. McCoy pauses on one, dated October 23. Lieutenant Commander Kenji Sato's final log, recovered from a driftwood-strewn beach near Tulagi. The script is precise, brushstrokes unwavering. Dawn patrol, 751st. Fuel 85% outbound. Intercepted at 10,000 meters by enemy Grummins. Port engine grazed, leak detected, acrid odor. Attempted jettison, but flames erupted wing route. Crew integrity compromised. For the Emperor. Below, in pencil, to Father. The Betty flies like wind over Akita rice fields. Tell mother her son soared high. If I do not return, know I struck true. McCoy folds it, the paper crackling like dry leaves, a faint scent of brine clinging to the fibers. Not a will, he thinks, but an epitaph etched in flight plan ink. The fires multiply through 43. January 1943, off Kolombangara, the dinner run. Betty's inbound with 800-kilo torps for the cruiser Chicago. Marine corsairs from Vela La Vela pounce at dusk, the sun a blood-orange smear on the anvil clouds. Harrington, now with VMF 214 Black Sheep, leads the bounce. His F4U-1 thundering down the beam, gunsight pipper centering a Betty's canopy. The burst rakes the fuselage, rounds punching through the dorsal turret, the gunner slumping in a crimson arc. Fuel lines rupture, the volatile stream igniting mid-air, the bomber ballooning into a fireball that consumes itself in 1.2 seconds. Faster than a blink, hotter than a foundry. Fragments patter into the sea like iron rain, the shockwave buffeting Harrington's wings, a whump that rattles his teeth. Splashed another lighter, he teased, the slang bitter now. Flying Zippo no joke but a curse. That night, in a palm-thatched hooch, he writes home. These birds are ghosts till you hit 'em. Then they're matches. Pilots bail sometimes, but the fire gets most. Makes you wonder what kind of war they're fighting, against us or their own damn planes. The letter seals with a rip of envelope glue, mailed on a PBY that dodges flak all the way to Espiritu. McCoy cross-references the claims. 47 Bettys downed in the slot campaign, 62% to fire, incendiaries unnecessary. AP rounds suffice, the thin skins parting at 300 joules. He sketches the anatomy on a napkin. Wing tanks slung low, no inerting gas, no blowout panels. Just 0.04-inch aluminum, melting point 660 Z, ignition threshold for avgas vapors at 38 degrees Celsius. Deliberate, the lines converge. Every report a proof. The choice for range was a covenant with flame. Grant his aid, peers over. Sir, it's like they engineered for glory, not return. Bushido and blueprints. McCoy nods, the hut's single bulb swaying, casting shadows that dance like pyre ghosts. He recalls Honjo's name from captured Mitsubishi docks. Chief designer, petitions for retrofit denied by the 1st Naval Air Technical Arsenal. Trapped, McCoy muses, by the very perfection they chased. Flash to a Rabol squadron room, February 43. Petty Officer Masauato, survivor of the Java splash, briefs green cruise, his face scarred from saltwater boils. She'll carry you to the gods, he says, voice gravel from smoke inhalation. But mind the wings. One kiss from the enemy, and you're the offering. Laughter ripples, nervous, as they sign for their birds. Tail numbers 534-19, 534-22. Knowing the odds. 40% attrition per mission. Fire the Reaper's most eager scythe. The crescendo crashes April 18, 1943. Operation I Go. Yamamoto's offensive. From Kahili, Buin, 51 Bettys escort 6 Zeros bound for Guadalcanal in a bid to break the stalemate. P-38 Lightnings from Guadalcanal. Tom Lanfear's flight. Ambush at 18,000 feet over Bougainville. The twin boom fighters diving like falcons. The melee is frenzy. Tracers crisscrossing the anvil heads. A Betty's starboard engine shearing off in a gout of oil and fire, cartwheeling into the jungle canopy below. Another takes a deflection burst to the cockpit. No armor, the pilot's goggles shattering, controls going slack as the nose drops, plowing into the slot in a plume that silvers the waves. Yamamoto's own transport, a modified Betty, white-painted for command, falls victim, 50 cals stitching its flank, the unshielded tanks erupting in a bloom that lights the ambush for miles. The admiral perishes aboard, his death a seismic ripple. Headlines in Tokyo, morale fracturing like the wing spars. McCoy reads the after-action in 45, the report clinical. Fuel ignition instantaneous. No ejection possible. But the subtext screams, the man who planned the Pacific's conquest died in the machine that enabled it, range delivering him to doom. Through summer 43, the pyres stack. Espiritu Santo raids, Santa Cruz reprisals, Betty's limping home trailing smoke, crews jumping into the drink, only to drown in their May Wests, weighed by unburned avgas soaking their flight suits. Harrington racks 10 kills, 7 Bettys, each a mirror. The initial crack of impact, the blue flash, the inevitable bloom, his logbook fills. August 7, Rico, wing fire, no survivors. September 3, belly tank hit spun in. The entries blur, the glamour of dawn patrols curdling to routine horror. In Clark's hangar, McCoy closes the final folder, the stack a tower of condemnation, 1,200 pages, 400 incidents, 70% fire-related. The Betty sits silent, its captured wings unmarred but accusatory, aluminum shimmering under the arc lamps like a blade awaiting the forge. He traces a fuel line with his finger, the seam cold now, but memory hot. They flew into the sun, he reflects, chasing shadows across oceans, only to find the light within. Grant clears his throat. What do we say in the report, sir? Defect? McCoy shakes his head, the silence vast as the Pacific. No, faith. They built a bomber that could cross oceans, but not survive a bullet. April 18, 1943. The humid shroud over Bougainville clings like a fever, the jungle canopy, a matted green roof pierced by volcanic vents that belch sulfurous whispers. At Buin Airfield, Kahili to the locals, a scar of coral and crushed lava on the island's southeastern flank, 6 G4M Bettys idle on revetments ringed by sandbag walls and anti-aircraft pits. Their engines tick cooling, props windmilling lazily in the cross breeze off Treasury Islands. It's Operation I Go, the combined fleet's desperate lunge to blunt the American noose tightening around the Solomons. Vice Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor's Thunder, boards his personal transport. A G4M1 Model 11, tail number 316, painted gloss white with green crosses on the rudders, a command bird, stripped even further for VIP range. its tanks brimming with 1,500 gallons of unshielded avgas, the aluminum skins burnished to a mirror sheen under the equatorial glare. Yamamoto settles into the forward compartment, a Spartan nook beside the pilot's perch, wicker chair bolted to the deck, a folding map table strewn with dispatches from Rabaul. At 59, the admiral is a specter of his former self, gaunt from ulcers, uniform hanging loose on a frame once robust from Etajima drills. He lights a cigarette, the match flare dancing in his eyes, and exhales toward the canopy, watching the smoke eddy against the glass. To the front lines, he murmurs to his staff officer, Captain Kikuichi Minami, strapped in across the aisle. The men need to see their Sin-C unbroken. The pilot, Lieutenant Yasuhiro Koga, nods, throttle easing forward, the Kase-15s barking to life in a symphony of backfires and blue exhaust. The formation, 6 Bettys, 9-0 escorts, lifts at 600, arcing southeast at 50 knots, bound for Balalay in the Shortlands, 100 miles through skies Yamamoto once owned. Unseen, 16,000 feet above, 4 P-38G Lightnings of Mission 941 prowl. Tom Lanphier Jr. and Ray Hine in the lead pair, their twin Allisons whispering at 40 inches manifold. Codenamed Operation Vengeance, the ambush is velvet precision. MAG-01 on Guadalcanal cracking the IJN code, pinning the Admiral's itinerary like a lepidopterist with a butterfly. The Lightnings dive from the sun at 9:25, throttles firewalled, the world compressing to 400 miles per hour blurs. Lanfear's Pipper centers the white Betty's canopy, Yamamoto's bird, lagging slightly for station keeping, and the trigger walks, 4.50 cals per nose, 500 rounds apiece, stitching the fuselage from cockpit to wing root. The rounds bite clean, no armor to blunt them, the aluminum parting at 2,800 FPS, tracers, incendiary-tipped, piercing the starboard tank like hot needles through vellum. Fuel vapors, pressurized at 2 psi, ignite in a millisecond chain, blue flash to orange bloom, the wing folding inward as spars melt, the structure yawing into a flat spin. Koga hauls desperate on the stick, but the fire races aft, consuming the radio shack in a whoosh of superheated air, Minami's shout dying in the roar. Yamamoto, cigarette tumbling from slack fingers, has seconds, perhaps glimpsing the P-38's shadow before the canopy shatters, the cabin filling with acrid hell. The Betty plunges 9,000 feet inverted, exploding midair at 4,000, a fireball unspooling like a flare pistol shot, debris pattering into the jungle below like metallic rain. No chutes, no mercy. Lanphier pulls up, the shockwave buffeting his booms, radio crackling. Bandit leader down, big one, flames from stem to stern. The other Bettys scatter, 2 more falling to Hine's guns, one holed and limping, the other a wing root inferno that cartwheels into the treetops, igniting a secondary blaze that smolders for days. Word reaches Tokyo by dusk via submarine cable from truck. Yamamoto presumed dead, the Empire's talisman snuffed in the machine he championed. Funerals follow, state rites at Tsukiji Hongenji, Yamamoto's ashes in a lacquered urn. But the subtext burns hotter. The Betty, midwife to Pearl, now midwife to defeat. In Mitsubishi's Nagoya halls, Kiro Honjo reads the obit in the Asahi Shimbun, his drafting hand steady on the teacup, but the steam curls accusatory. Range delivered him, he thinks, as it delivers us all. McCoy, in Clark's hangar a year later, fingers the decrypted intercept, yellowed onion skin from Fruity's codebreakers, tracing the flight path with a thumbnail blackened by engine grease. The Betty's blueprint overlays it, fuel lines branching like red arteries, the Admiral's seat a nexus of vulnerability. Irony in aluminum, he reflects, the arc lamps humming overhead like distant dirges. Grant slides a folder across the workbench. Oka reports, the Betty's final perversion. By mid-1944, the fires had forged desperation. As Saipan falls, B-29s arc from the Marianas, their payloads turning Tokyo to ash, the IJN's air arm hemorrhaging birds faster than factories could spit them. Enter the Yokosuka MXY-7 Oka, Cherry Blossom, a rocket-powered kamikaze glider, 5,000 pounds of plywood and warhead, guided by a pilot's final plunge. But the Oka is no lone wolf. It rides Parasite under a Betty's belly, the G4M2 Model 24 mothership hauling it 50 miles offshore, releasing at 12,000 feet for a 600 miles per hour terminal dive. The first trials, off Kyushu in July 44, are farce and tragedy. The Betty's ventral cradle, bolted struts and sway braces, stresses the already frail fuselage. The added 2.6 tons dragging cruise speed to 140 knots, range slashed to 1,200 miles. Honjo protests in a memo to the First Air Arsenal. Structural integrity compromised. Fuel consumption up 30%. Recommend armored cradle. Denied. Brass demands volume. 2,000 Okas by spring 45, each a suicide arrow to gut carriers like Essex or Intrepid. The first combat drop, April 12, 1945, off Okinawa. 16 Bettys from Ishigaki, each lugging an Oka like a tumor. American Hellcats pounce at 20 miles out, the formation a lumbering echelon over the East China Sea. Commander Goro Nonoshida's lead bird takes the first burst. P-61 Black Widows from Enterprise, AP rounds raking the unshielded tanks. The ignition is biblical. The Oka shears free in the blaze, tumbling end over end into the drink, while the Betty balloons into a plasma sphere, the rocket fuel cooking off in secondary cracks that light the dawn for 10 miles. Nonoshida's crew, 7 men plus the Oka pilot, 19-year-old midshipman Kiyoshi Sugimura, strapped in the glider's cockpit with a rising sun headband, vanish in the updraft. Sugimura's last transmission, faint over the static. Mothership aflame, proceeding alone, Tenno Heika Banzai. His Oka dives unguided, splashing harmlessly 5 miles short. Of the 16, 3 Okas launch, 2 hitting transports, gutting Stanvac Calcutta with 1,200-pound warheads, the third cratering a destroyer's deck amidships. But the Bettys? 11 lost to fire, the parasite loads turning infernos to cataclysms, crews immolated before the chutes could bloom. Survivor accounts, fished from the waves by Akigumo pickets, paint horror. The wings wept fire before the hit, we were candles with wings. McCoy pores over the wreckage photos, grainy Navy intel shots from Hornet's darkroom. Betty fuselages twisted like licorice, Oka cradles fused to the belly in molten slag. The math chills. 75% loss rate per sortie, the motherships reaping more pilots than the suns. From bomber to hearse, he notes in his journal, the pen scratching like claws on tin. The range that conquered seas now ferries the damned. Harrington stateside on R&R by VE Day, reads of Okinawa in the Pacific Stars and Stripes, the headlines screaming kamikaze hell. Japs strap bombs to bombers. He crumples the page, the ink smearing on calloused fingers. Bastards turned their lighters into hearse floats. No wonder they burn so pretty. The pyres peek through summer 45. Leyte Gulf's ghosts, Musashi wallowing under Betty torpedoes, give way to homeland defense. Bettys from Formosa shuttling kamikaze loads to Kyushu strips, their tanks leaking from battle scars, igniting on hot runways like overfilled lanterns. August 6th Hiroshima, August 9th Nagasaki. The atomic blooms dwarf all, but in the skies above Betty's prowl futile, radar shadows on the edge of apocalypse. Honjo, evacuated to a mountain redoubt near Fuji, watches the contrails from his porch, the distant thuds rumbling like taiko drums. Production halts July 20. Aluminum famine, factories bombed to rubble, but 2,400 Bettys had flown, 1,500 lost, fire claiming 70%. His final design tweak, the G4M3 with self-sealing tanks, prototype too late, 5 airframes rusting in sheds. Surrender dawns August 15. Tokyo Bay, Missouri's decks sweltering under a typhoon's fringe, the wind whipping ensigns like battle flags. 2 white-painted Bettys, G4M2 763-15 and 763-16, tails striped in green, circle overhead at 1,000 feet, engines idling to a respectful thrum. Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu and General Yoshijiro Umezu aboard the lead, bearing the instrument of capitulation, the parchment tubes clutched like fragile relics. The planes had flown from Jaeger's Opama, 1,200 miles round trip, fuel gauges hovering at fumes, the crews hyper-vigilant for sparks on the untreated tanks. No incidents. The birds land flawless on Atsugi's pockmarked strip, props folding like bowed heads. McCoy learns of it via radio teletype, the dot-dash chatter filling his Quonset on late, surrender flight complete. Betty transports unharmed. He steps outside, the evening rain pattering on banana leaves, and lights a lucky strike, the ember a tiny defiance. The captured Betty at Clark, his Betty, sits under camouflage netting now, destined for right field's disassembly line, its secrets to be filleted for the AAF's next generation. He circles it one last time, boots squelching in the mud, hand trailing the wing's leading edge, smooth, unscarred, a lie in silver. Inside, the tanks yawn empty, the voids echoing with ghosts. Yamamoto's smoke, Nonoshida's shout, Sugimura's banzai, Grant joins him, clipboard under arm. Report's done, sir. Titled it, The Type 1 Rico, A Study in Sacrificial Aerodynamics. Brassel loved the euphemism. McCoy exhales, smoke mingling with mist. Call it what it was. A prayer in rivets. They chased the horizon, and the horizon chased them back. He thinks of Honjo, fate unknown, but whispers says suicide, September 45, a pistol and a Tokyo Ryokan, blueprints scattered like autumn leaves. Masauato, the Java survivor, repatriated to a farm in Hokkaido, his hands gnarled from tilling what war took. Harrington, mustered out in 46, opening a garage in Spokane, tuning Fords with the same precision he once tuned kills. The hangar falls quiet, the rain a soft requiem on the tin roof. McCoy seals the report with wax, the chrysanthemum stamp, a borrowed irony, and steps into the downpour. The Betty remains, a monument to the calculus of creed, elegance over endurance, reach over return. Brilliance, yes, the fastest bomber of its age, the one that bent the Pacific to Japan's will. But in the bending it broke itself, fuel lines as veins, wings as pyres. They engineered beauty and built their own funeral pyre. In the end, as the monsoon swells to torrent, McCoy pauses at the door, glancing back. The plane shimmers in the half-light, a silver wraith, its silence louder than any engine's roar. Not failure, he realizes, the truth settling like silt. Faith. Engineered to the edge and over. The war's machines fade, B-17s to museums, Zeros to scrap, but this one lingers, a moral scalpel. In chasing perfection, they forgot survival. The Betty wasn't a flaw in the fleet. It was the fleet's soul, distilled, doomed, dazzling, devoured by its own light. They built brilliance that burned itself alive. If forgotten machines and their hidden truths fascinate you, subscribe for more World War revelations.